welcome. I'm Alex Sheil from the Creative Innovative Network, and I've got with me here Nick Rakis, founder and business designer at Accelio. How are you going today, Nick?
Good, Alex. How are you?
Yeah, doing well. So just to frame up with a little bit of context, Nick and I have been working together over the past 18 months with some incredible leaders right at the forefront of innovation within Australia. I might pass over to you just to explain a little bit about what Accelio does. You do a far better job than I,
Cool.
So go for it.
Okay, so yeah, nice to meet you. I'm Nick Rakis from Accelio. I describe myself as a business designer, chief business designer, because I'm the founder of Accelio. And the way that we describe what Accelio does is we're a business design firm, and so we help senior leaders accelerate the change that they're looking to create, generally in large environments. And we do that so that we can help them essentially make progress faster towards their most meaningful missions or work. And so a lot of our work spans across the government space, industry with commercial, and we have a bit of time with the science and R&D space. So we work a lot with scientists and researchers to help them take their best ideas in the lab and try and make them real so that they can make a difference in the world.
Yeah, fantastic. That's a really good way of summing it up. But
Cool.
You haven't always been here at Accelio, so a bit about your background. You were working a little bit in industry beforehand, running some of the big projects at Ozpost, for instance. I know a pretty well-known one would be the Parcel locker rollout, which you worked on. My question is, how did you get from idea, so thinking in the boardroom, we do a lot of innovation workshops, those sorts of things, that space out into the ground, onto the ground, and working with teams to actually get those things into the real world?
Okay, cool. So maybe touching on my so how we get from idea to like real world. I think what I would say is there's a couple of things. So one is the type of organization really matters, and so I'm thinking about who's your audience in your network. The smaller the organization, the more change you can create or you can influence to a degree. The larger the organization, the more layers there are to influence change. So at Ozpost, when I got to Ozpost, I inherited parcel lockers. Someone else had come up with the idea. They did the business case. I inherited just that business case, I think, when it was getting approved. And so my job was more about how do we roll that out over 2 years, which was no easy piece. So it was much more about how do we make the idea real through the transformation.
Yeah.
And in a big place, big enterprise like Australia Post, there's just a lot of stakeholders. There's a lot of different areas that just because you have a business case approved doesn't mean everyone's like, yeah, we're like all up for this change. And so I learned the hard way that there was still a lot of stakeholders in the organization that were not keen on it. And so even though you've got the budget and it's been approved, you still have to do a lot of work in influencing those stakeholders. Now, that was back then. I wasn't that good at influencing people. So I just took the let's get shit done attitude, which got me into a bit of trouble sometimes. But so I'd say, when you're working in smaller places, your ability to influence that change is easier. And so the big thing for me is, if you're working with any organizational context, most of what you're trying to do is actually influence change. And particularly you're trying to get buy-in from senior leaders, across the spectrum.
Yeah.
And so the more that you can build your own internal network within that organization beyond maybe the wherever you sit, the better, because you're going to be able to influence those conversations, whether it's formally or informally. And I probably didn't appreciate that as much. It's kind of just, it's networking, but internally to get the job done. And sometimes we think, just because we have a few reporting lines or we sit in this space, we have to work within that. You have to be quite creative in how you start to maneuver around those organizations because they're all built on people.
Yeah.
So that's like trying to draw something large like Ozpost, which is really big, versus maybe something a lot smaller where you can influence that change a lot quicker, hopefully. So yeah.
No, that's really interesting. How did you find that you broke those silos, and was there resistance in breaking them when you tried to sort of weave your way around the organization?
Yeah, there's always what I didn't appreciate when I was a little bit early in my career, which we do now at Accelio, is the first assumption that I used to make was that just because there's a piece of work that someone said progresses doesn't mean that everybody is thrilled about that within a large business. So what's the lesson there? The lesson for if you're working in a company of any size, or even if you're a consultant, doing work in these large organizations, just because someone likes the fact that you're doing that doesn't mean everybody else is interested. In fact, you would probably have a lot of people that are actively sabotaging that work because they don't see the value in it. And so the thing that I had to start learning was, how do I start to understand who is needed to make the change work, and how do they see the value of that? And so back in the AusPost world, there would be a change manager because there was all these transformation works. They'd say, oh, you've got to, and I thought, oh, what's the change manager's job to do the change work? I'm just here to get shit done. I'm the project manager. My job is to manage budgets, people, team, tech, get stuff done. And I kind of dismissed the change bit. I was like, once change is for when we roll it out, and then someone else can figure out how to run that, like once the lockers are on the ground. Yep. But what I started to appreciate was, no, it was actually my job to manage change. And my job to manage change was to interface between the areas that were impacted. And what I mean by impacted is, if you're a consultant or you're someone in a business and you're working on something, you really need to understand the change that's trying to create and for who in that company. And so sometimes we just take that as a given. Oh, we're doing something, and because it's our project, everyone should be like, oh, we love it, it's your project. So what I learned was, no, you need to be thinking about those impacted parties really early, and using the loose word stakeholder consultation or those things. It's really going, who in this organization has a high degree of influence that I need to make sure I get on board. Yeah. If you're internal, it's a little bit more rigid because it's like, well, you got to go to this forum and do that thing. Yeah. But if you're a consultant, the best thing that you can do is start to navigate that system informally, so that you're really starting to understand how real decisions get made. Because a lot of the times, even though there might be forums or a steering committee or whatever, the real decisions don't get made that way. They're actually influenced through consultation or through engagement. So for me, I learned the hard way. I learned the hard way of just saying, nah, well, I was a bit of a blunt instrument. I'm like, well, there's a steering committee, and technically the steering committee makes all the decisions. So I'm just going to write the best brief ever and then just take it to the steering committee and say, this is what I want to do. And what happened? Most of the time it got rejected. And it wasn't rejected like, 7 of us voted and, 7 voted and all of a sudden I was outvoted or whatever. It got rejected because the stakeholders knew how to manage the politics in that business. And so the result of that was I ended up with double the work because they were like, well, we don't think you've considered A, B, C, or we don't think you've thought about X, Y, Z. If you're a consultant, this might feel familiar to you. And so I ended up with a lot of work, and I just thought people were just being just really difficult. But actually, I didn't spend enough time to understand what essentially I had to negotiate. What's the buy-in, and how do I negotiate with these areas to get their buy-in to what we're doing? Even though technically it was on the top CEO list, it was an official project. Yeah. You still have to negotiate and get that buy-in. So that's probably they're my big lessons. Yeah. Just because it's your project doesn't mean it's going to happen. Yeah. We sometimes just assume that's the case.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And you mentioned interacting with some of those stakeholders as well. I'm interested to hear, how do you find those people, I guess, as champions, or those people who could support those sorts of projects in the organisation? What key traits or other things do you look for in those who share similar mindsets around wanting change?
Yeah, so I would it's kind of what we do now. So I learned this the hard way, and then I've applied it to the work that we do as consultants at Accelio. If you're new, so if you're coming into an organization that's new, you should be, getting up to speed. If you're not reading every piece of background information, you should be, even though we sometimes gloss over that because there's always other priorities or customers or stakeholders saying, we need you to do A, B, C. But I think the more knowledge that you can acquire, the better, because you start to understand the lessons and the history there. Yep. But the second thing is, you should be spending as much of your time informally trying to navigate that organization and reach out versus formal channels. So I always look at where are all the informal conversations that you should be having. And so very, very practically, if you're in a building, it's a bit easier because you can walk past walk past people's desks, look at the name plaque and be like, who's that and where they sit. And you could do that in a very subtle way. You could say you're lost and you'd be like, I'm meeting someone, is that here? I use all these techniques. But if it's virtual, which is a bit harder, if you're remote, it's looking up I used to do this all the time, the Outlook global address list. So if you're on Outlook or you're on Gmail, you'll look at the company directory. And so I would just spend hours looking at that company directory and saying, okay, who sits in this business unit? Who's the key person? Who do I understand as the key players here? What are the titles? And I would start asking questions about, what about this person? Are they involved here? And you'll start to understand the informal influence and authority that exists there. And so they're the little hacks that I have. I would be looking at that. I'd be stalking them on LinkedIn or vice versa. And I like to do informal conversation in these types of organizations. So if I send everyone an email and say, hi, John or Sarah, are you the person of influence or authority? I would try and do it informally. So I try and call them and say, I'm not sure what's happening. Can you direct me in the right area? I'm doing ABC, just to get a lay of the land. And then one thing I don't think people do enough is, what's your point of view? So if you're running a project or you're doing something, I think a lot of the times, whether you're an employee, contractor, consultant, we make the assumption that everyone in that company knows what that thing's about. And 90% of people don't know. And even worse, it's the Chinese whispers kind of analogy. They only know what they've heard from somebody else. And so they have these informed views about something that might not even be factually correct about the thing that you're working on. And so if you can create your point of view, it says, hey, this is what I'm working on. This is what I'm thinking about. My understanding is, you're the stakeholder, or I think you're important here. The best thing that you're going to get is validation. They're going to say, no, I don't care. I'm not important, but I think that person is, and you should be talking to them. Yeah. The second thing is you're going to learn how to communicate what you're doing in that organization. And, we've seen this in our work. The subtlety of language really matters. So when you're somewhere new or you're somewhere different, you'll be triggering people because you're using the wrong word, and you'll see them twitch or something. And it's just that you're not familiar with the context of the lingo. So they're like really practical things that I do. You're kind of, you're in discover spy mode. You're kind of like trying to understand the landscape and figure out what's going on. And I think we sometimes get too caught up in all the work that we have to do. Oh, I've got a deliverable due, I've got to do all that stuff. And what you realize is, but you're going to get blocked, or you're really missing some big picture context here. Yeah. And I'd say a lot of people wait for permission. They say, well, do I need permission to do that? My answer is no. Just go and do it.
You've exposed all your secrets.
Just say Nick told me, it's okay.
So if you know now, if you get a sneaky message on LinkedIn from Nick,
I got fired. It's because of you.
Something more strategic underneath that. So you've spoken a little bit about reaching out within organisations to people. Now, I guess I'm more interested to hear a little bit more about Accelio and some of the work you're doing here, particularly some of the cross-institutional work we've done. So I know we've engaged across government, research, industry, and connected people actually between those for conversations and workshops, forums, those sorts of things. I guess what I'm interested to hear is, how do you align stakeholders from such different backgrounds with different motives in a place for one shared mission or goal?
Yeah, that's interesting. I think that's so I think there's two ways that maybe I'd think about that. One is, sometimes you will be lucky or not to have engagements that are cross-institutional. Like they're great because they're usually working on something hard that's important. Complex challenges. It could be any complex challenge requires actors across institutions. And so I say great because you're lucky in a sense that you're working on something important, but have the expectation that it's going to be really hard, because they are, or else they would be solved by now. So I think I say that because then there's more formal avenues. So I think you have to be really conscious about where are the formal avenues for engagement across these institutions and where are the informal avenues. So, because you touched on two things, you mentioned, sometimes we're working across these networks and we sometimes connect the dots and bring things together. And I'd say that was not by design. It's probably as a consequence of just doing the work over so many years that we're building all these informal relationships. And whereas the formal side, which is, okay, we're working across three institutions, how do we start to, how do we help get these stakeholders aligned, or have better conversations around this? And so I'll start on the formal stuff because I think that's easier.
Yeah,
and then go to the informal. So I think when you're working across institutions, for me, and again, this is in more the consulting landscape or the agency landscape,
Sure.
you really got to be clear. First, you got to be clear who's your client. And so it's the organization and the sponsor, I call it that. So I think of, okay, who is my client that's paying? And it's not just about paying the bills, but who is the client that is owning this piece? And then who's the sponsor? And so I think about that because I first think of the organization's context that they're engaging us for. And so there's a degree of, we need to be a little bit selfish or pure on the brief that they're asking us to have, because they're actually engaging us formally. So there's a bit of, it's good practice to do that. The second one is who's the sponsor. So who's the senior leader within that organization, and what's their, what is it that they want? And so I spend a lot of time trying to understand the organizational context and then the senior leader's context, because the senior leader's context is a lot more nuanced on what they're driving for, whether that's their agenda, whether that's they're trying to amplify the organization's agenda, whether that's their strategy. And so I spend a lot of time understanding from, I call them a sponsor, essentially who's sponsoring the work. That's important because I try and paint a really clear picture on what's the brief look like. And the secret, in my view, is that 90% of sponsors or organizations don't have a clear brief. They don't know. That's why they're engaging people to help them. And so the first thing I'd say is don't assume that the brief is clear. And it's your job to clarify. Don't ask for a brief either. Say ask questions. So I would go in saying what's important to you, all their informal things, to try and build a picture of what is it that we think they really want. In that picture should be which other parties are critical to this picture, either by necessity, we're kind of joined to the hip, we don't have a choice, we're going to work together, or we think they're key in terms of what we're trying to do. And then you repeat the same process where possible. So I've learned that you tend to get more insight in informal conversations. So wherever you can try and give someone an informal call or a chat, you will tend to get better insight than formal conversations. Formal conversations, people tend to play a role. They tend to toe the line, as you would say. It's not that they're not being transparent. It's just that it's a formality. So they're bringing a more formal point of view to what they're doing.
Yeah, it makes sense.
And I used to do this all the time where I used to think, that's the formal way, but you miss a lot of nuance on the, I don't like that person. I think they're a jackass. I don't like what they're doing. Your job is to understand those drivers so that you can try and find commonality between what those firms are trying to do. And so everything that we do when it's multi-stakeholder, especially across organizations, is asking the very obvious question, what are we trying to solve for here? And what's the big picture? And most of the time, people have not taken a step back to think about the big picture. They're all they're thinking about their particular point of view on the agenda.
Yeah,
they're all trying to solve the problem, but there is no one problem. There are multiple problems from multiple perspectives. And so your role, or the role that I've learned to play, is you're much more of a translator and an interface to help have these stakeholders see that it's not that there's a right or wrong here, it's that this is complex and that we've got different points of view. And then how do we create a story around that? So how do we create a story that we're all aligning? So I use the word alignment a lot, because when you're working on big issues, like impact-driven issues, there's no such thing as like decision-making is distributed. So it's not like going into the Oz Post world and saying, can I get a forum to agree on the thing? It's a lot more complicated with multi-agencies or multi-parties, because not one party can have a veto. So they have to coordinate and work better together. So I find stories are really powerful to get people on board there around the narrative and the framing of what are we trying to do.
Yeah.
And you would be surprised, you've seen this with us, how long we spend trying to get people on board on a story and the framing, which 10 years ago I would have said, God, help me. I've become a storyteller. I'm here to get shit done. And now I've learned to know, if we can't get people aligned on something that they're willing to work together on and they're willing to have a different point of view on, there's no way we'll make any progress. So a lot of the focus is around how do we do that in that setting. The informal aspect is interesting, I think. The informal aspect is, as you start to build a network, it's funny how the world's so big and so small at the same time. You start to realize, I've actually come across that person. And so we've built equity in our networks because we're interfacing with clients, we're doing, work in similar spaces, and you end up bumping into similar people.
Yeah.
And so if you can keep tabs on that, which I've done not a bad job on, I could have done a better job on it. You actually can start to be the connector, play the role of the connector. And there's a book that I read years ago called Never Eat Alone.
Oh, it's a fantastic book. Link to it.
It's an old one.
Fantastic book. That book actually, really changed my views on connection and relationships and the importance of that. I remember before that book, you used to tell me, Alex, you got to stop reading these books. You got to get out there. You got to be doing these networking events. You got to be seeing people. And after I read that book, I was like, Nick is onto something. Absolutely.
Yeah. So the idea there is, how do you play a role? Sometimes we think creating connection is not valuable. I had to change my mindset on this. So now networking on its own, I think there's a balancing there, because if you're able to create connection, you are hopefully tying two kind of opportunities or two pieces of value together. Yeah. So you have to get beyond the classical whatever networking means to people. Some people cringe, but if you can start to understand, okay, this is who you are. I know a bit more about you. If you've worked with someone, even better, because when you're creating a connection for a network, if you're connecting to people. Yeah. Not that you're vouching for them, but you see mutual value in those two stakeholders coming together. And so as you accrue that over time, and if you've worked with them, that becomes highly valuable, and you should be protective of your network, because you want to make sure that the connection that you're creating is a reflection of your reputation. If that makes sense. So by accident, as we've done a lot more work, and we've started to understand nuance, we're able to see connections in maybe informal ways or in non-linear ways that we think. Yeah. But we also know those relationships, so there's a degree of credibility that we bring when we can connect those people together. Yeah. But we never set out to do that. That was a consequence of doing good work with lots of people over time and keeping tabs on it, which I could have done a better job on. But my view is, the networking piece, what I've learned is when you create that connection over time, as you build more of a network, you'll become more pickier. Because at the start, you're like, I'll connect everyone. John meets Sarah, Sarah meets John. I think you guys would kill it. That's what I used to do back in the day all the time. Now I qualify people a lot carefully, because I go, well, I'm spending energy to connect you both. Second is, how do I know that you're both good actors in the system? And so by me making that connection, there's a degree of, it's like, what's the star rating? What's the Uber rating of, John and Sarah? And so as you do that more and more over time, there's a lot more reputation that comes with that. And so, but I would say for us, that's just been a byproduct of doing so much work with so many stakeholders. And then we're able to kind of see these dots in very different ways. Yeah. But it's not something that we set out to do day one. I think as we focus on doing good work, we met different people. We started to, work in different spaces. We started to see opportunities around, okay, well, actually, you don't know each other, but we think it's worthwhile having this conversation.
So what I'm hearing is quality connections rather than just quantity. Having a clear why and intent behind those connections, and then if you are connecting other people, making sure that there is actual purpose to be connecting those people, and not just bringing people together for the sake of it, and not actually considering how they might benefit each other and have value. Yeah,
great. And don't be afraid to vet. So at a minimum, if you say, well, Nick, I don't have that broad network, or I haven't connected with that many people. My thing would be, don't be lazy. Don't be like, Sarah, John, connect over email. You'll kill it. Keep me posted, or LinkedIn. Have a call with that person and say, okay, if you're looking to connect with someone in my network, not that I'm vetting you, talk to me about what you think you need help with, because if I understand that better, I'm better placed to actually help you in a better way. Now, it takes more time to do that, but you might be facilitating a much more deeper connection by doing that than just be doing the, hey, come together,
Let's all meet up.
Which I used to do all the time. But so I think, it starts as a volume play, meaning you think, okay, the more that I do, the better. But over time, you'll start to realize that you want to accrue higher quality connections, because they're the ones that stay. It's kind of like when you're on LinkedIn, you're like, everyone except everybody, everyone's my friend, over time you start to become a bit more picky because you go, well, I don't know half that people in that network anyway. So you're better off having a small network that's more meaningful, because you can actually help each other in a better way. That's kind of my mentality.
That's great take. It's really interesting. I'll take some of those tips on board for sure. So when I actually started at Accelio, we're going to switch gears a little bit.
Oh,
You
cool.
recommended this book to me,
yes,
which
yeah.
is actually one that
Yeah.
I pass on to a lot of people. It's How Will You Measure Your Life by
Yeah.
Clay Christensen. And if you don't know Clay, he wrote a few books, actually, a couple of them more like business strategy, perhaps a little bit more dense than this book. But the premise of this book is all around creating a life with intent and meaning, and being somewhat strategic about the way you're going to design your life. I guess my question on the back of that is, based on this book and the insights that you gathered, what do you consider in life strategy and actually, designing your life? Particularly, you're a founder, you're quite a busy founder. How do you structure your life around that?
All right, cool. That's interesting. It's I came across that book by accident because I was reading all the boring innovation theory stuff from Clayton Christensen.
You're like, this is really different. Is this the
and
same guy?
yeah. And if you haven't read the book, like read it. The thing that I would, if I had to give it a summary, because I gave this to Alex, our videographer. He was like, what's his book about? And I said, Clayton Christensen starts with this story that says, I went to Harvard with all these great people. They're all my friends at Harvard, but yet a reasonable percentage of those friends are in jail.
Yeah.
And how did they get to jail? And I don't think any of them set out to go to jail when they got to Harvard. That's kind of the hook in the book, which is a great hook. And so the book talks about, for me, my takeaway of the book is, in geeky, theory terms, is, don't pursue a strategy that you don't intend to execute, or don't execute a strategy that you don't intend to pursue. And so what does that mean? It means that, if you, be careful in doing something that leads you down a path that you never kind of set out to go down. So no one in Harvard, hopefully not, decided that they wanted to go to jail.
Yeah.
And what the book talks about is, well, it's a set of activities and sequences and events that they let take place that led them to that position in life. And it's probably fair to say that none of them plan to do that directly, And so the book starts to go, why is that? What's the discrepancy there? What's the phenomenon around why they got there? And so it's interesting. So the way I don't think about it as life strategy. So I think it's the wrong question. And for me, the reason why I think it's the wrong question is that it's such an existential question. So I would be so stressed thinking about life strategy. What I would say is I would probably take a step back and say, what are you, because you have multiple life strategies in my view. My life strategy at 22 to 25 to 30 changed every couple of years. Yeah. And so there was no unified life strategy.
Yeah, it's not like you set out and you're I'm doing this for the rest of my life. This is what the next 80 or so live a good life will look like. Correct.
Yeah,
no, absolutely.
If anyone's got that, I'd love to hear it. But
me too, actually. That's true.
Yeah, so I look at it as I am more goal orientated, right? So I tend to look at and say, so when we think about geeky strategy, we say, well, what is strategy? Strategy is a set of choices that you're looking to make. And really those choices should be bound in priorities that you have and the amount of resources that you have available to you. So if it's just you, if it's just me, I say, well, I'm Nick and I want to make some choices in my life. I've got a set of priorities that I want to focus on. I can't do everything, so I have to choose some set of priorities. And I don't have unlimited resourcing, whether that's time, money, capacity, that's finite. So I have to be very careful in what I choose to do. And so what the book has influenced me most on is first, I think, in really boring terms, what are my goals? Where am I going? And it's okay if you don't know where you're going. I don't know where I'm going half the time either. So, I either have to say, if I don't know where I'm going, what can I do to help explore where I might want to go and inform what that looks like? Because a lot of people say, well, I don't know where I want to go. I don't know what I want to do. Yeah. And so, when we do all of our sprints, we tease teams and we just say, spend 4 weeks exploring and then pick one, so pick something.
And then execute.
Yeah, pick something. And there's kind of a bit of truth in that because you can't, asking someone to pick just randomly is not something they're going to want to do, but asking them to explore and then putting a constraint around it and saying, well, because you can't explore forever. Yeah. You could, but I'm not sure where you're going to go. So the way that I think about this is, how do you allow time to deliberately explore so that you can learn? And then you got to make some choices. And the choices should be grounded in, you have to set some goals and have some conviction about what you want to do, even if you're not sure if it's going to work. And so that the piece of how do you measure your life is what one thing is that I've started to think about is, well, how would I quantify that? So if I set that goal, and generally achieving that goal is an event. So it's either I achieved the goal or I didn't. What's important to me about how I would quantify progress on that goal? And, you could quantify it by money. You could say, well, I want a pay rise, or vice versa. You can quantify it by saying it's the amount of learning, it's the amount of doing. So I've thought really carefully about what's the measure that I think is helping me make progress, and how do I use that as an indicator? Because sometimes goals take time. It's not usually, oh, hey, I ticked this thing and I achieved it yesterday. Sometimes these are 2, 3, 4 years at a time. And so for me, when it comes to how that's influenced me, I tend to think more in goals, and then what are the measures that I think are the ones that I should be paying attention to. And then I have to be open to what's happening around me so I can change my mind. Yeah. But I think less in like unified strategy. I think more in, okay, what's my short-term goals? And then the strategy is, how would I get there? So how would I, and we do this for a living at Accelio with sprints. We spend a lot of time with clients saying, we know your goal is not your plan. Your goal is just, you put a mark there. And most people don't know how to get from where they are to where they want to be. And that's the strategy. And so, if you can spend time making sure that you're pursuing a strategy you intend for the goal, not one that you don't intend to pursue. So it could be, and we could use inversion for this and say, well, let's just flip it and say, what are all the things if you did that would lead you in the wrong direction? Yeah. Most likely you'd be like, I shouldn't do all these things. And so that's how I tend to think about it. Think about goals, think in short-term increments rather than really long-term, and then spend time to actually learn what's the best way to kind of execute those goals, because that's actually the strategy play. The strategy play is, what's the way that I think is the most optimal way for me to do this? And I spend a lot more time thinking about that, because I'd rather spend time thinking about the most optimal way to get from A to B than just doing what I used to do when I was a bit younger, which is like sheer execution, like just sheer like, let's get shit done. And then I had an executive come to me once, and he walked out of the steering committee, and he said, Nick, you got there, but you went through 2 walls, metaphorically, and that's a lot of energy. And actually, you could have just opened the door on the side here if you just paused and just thought about this for a little bit longer. But I was very action orientated back then, so now I spend a little bit more time just carefully thinking, or doing my exploration about how am I going to get from A to B, especially if I don't know how to get to A to B, because I don't have all the answers. So that's how I've used it, to help me think about, okay, where am I going? How do I want to get there? And then what does progress look like for me? So how do I measure progress? I don't think we think about that enough. What's progress for me? So that's my take.
Yeah, no, I feel like you mentioned a lot of parallels between business strategy and life strategy, which is similar to the book. So in the book, he spends a lot of time using similar frameworks to the ones that the geeky ones, the desirability, feasibility, viability, and those sorts of frameworks, to be able to like understand, life within those lenses. And you talk quite a lot about lenses. Do you see any other parallels between the type of work we do with our clients versus like what you think about in your day-to-day life?
It's a good question. That's a very deep question. So different lenses. You're going to stop me on this one. I have to think. Can you remind me, because I haven't read the book for a while. What's a lens? Do you remember any lenses?
He does talk about the desirability, feasibility, viability framework. And I guess like other ways of seeing things such as journey map, like those sorts of tools that we may consider like using for like business strategy.
Okay. Yeah, makes sense. Yeah. So when I think, if I think about my personal life or my goal setting, I think the thing that I've probably changed my mind a lot in maybe the last 10 years was, I used to think 10 years ago that building was the hardest thing. So I used to go, well, most of the hard work is in building, so I'm going to focus all my attention on the fees. And also I have an engineering background, so
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm hearing engineering to designer.
So feasibility, can we do it? How do we do it? I never spent enough time on does anyone actually care? About this. And so how does that relate to life strategy? I also ask myself the question a lot, do I care? Because I don't know about you, but I have a lot of goals that I've set that I've done nothing about. And I remember a while ago I went to Google and I said, what does it mean when you write a goal down, but you actually haven't done anything about it for a really long time? And I couldn't find much on it. And my conclusion was, I just don't think you care enough about the goal. And so that's the desirability piece, which is, we sometimes set goals because, we say we should or vice versa, but is it really desirable for you? So do you understand why you're setting that goal? And are you really driven or motivated on less about the event and more about what that means to you or how that's going to contribute to what you're doing? Because I used to be very goal orientated. So I was like, just set the goal. Now I spend a lot more time saying, well, why would that be something worth my time and my energy? This is like the limited resourcing, the priority. Why is this a priority in the context of my life right now? And so could I do it? Probably. Feasibility, like tick. Viability, yeah, if I really had to, I had to put, so I spend a lot of time thinking about desirability, and I spend, the thing that's influenced me in the last couple of years is paying attention to my energy, which is a very, I don't know, fluffy thing to say. But what do I mean by that? It's paying very careful attention to what is energizing me versus what is taking energy away because there's a lot of times that I've thought about setting goals, but actually a lot of those goals are zapping energy from me. And so I have to be realistic in saying, well, if it's not giving me energy and I'm having to fuel this goal with energy, why am I doing it?
Yeah.
And it's asking that bigger why of, the 5 whys, another framework.
Yeah, no, exactly.
Why am I trying to do this? So they're the things that I tend to think a lot about. And energy is essentially another framing of engagement. Why am I engaged in this? How do I pursue something that is something that I have the energy to push versus dragging me? I feel like I'm dragged and I got to complete it and I also have I'm a lot more ruthless in saying, I changed my mind.
Yeah.
So I say, I set that goal.
Does drive the team nuts, but
sorry team. But yeah, I say, well, it's no longer serving me, or it's no longer serving us, or so I'm much more ruthless in changing my mind and saying, well, I don't think that's actually going to help me right now.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
And that's the lean startup, the lean startup lens, which is, how do I test and learn? And it's okay that I've changed my mind, even if it seems like a mini failure, because I've changed my mind. So that's like there's some of the frameworks or different ways that I think about it in terms of what can I take from some of the lenses into life strategy or life thinking.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. I think like your adaptability, like you talk about the lean startup, how you can like test and fail on like iterations is super impressive. I feel like it's not something a lot of people will think about. They stray away from failure and they'll like do everything they can to avoid it, but to actually lean into it and say, okay, I am leaning into it, knowing I probably am going to have to make a change on the other side of this cycle. Is super impressive. Yeah,
and I think just touching on with failure, I think no one loves failure. I hate failing at things. Hate's a strong word. I dislike failing, but also I dislike not following through on stuff. But the thing that I've learned is it's really shifting around how you think about learning, and to learn enough, you need to do enough. So what I've learned is, okay, even if I want to change my mind, I have to be realistic and say, am I changing my mind because of what I'm learning about the process? Have I got enough information or insights, or is it that I'm just not committed, type of thing? And so for me, I've spent a lot of time trying to focus on putting as much work in to what I'm doing so that I accrue the learning, and then I can decide from there whether it's worthwhile versus, just saying, fail is okay, or I don't want to fail. To fail, I have to do something, and do enough of something, and then to decide whether I think it's worthwhile, learning or failing from it. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, that's really, really great to hear. So it wouldn't be, I feel like it wouldn't be a conversation without you and between you and I without bringing up the AI buzzword.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
I'm going to get into that. So I guess considering some of these tools, and we can expand it out to like a business lens as well as like a life and thinking about, designing your life as well. A lot of people are talking about, and there are some studies about how new tech such as AI can be demotivating. It can limit critical thinking skills, and there is that sort of negative sentiment around it that you see on LinkedIn and those sorts of places.
Yeah.
On the flip side, where do you see the positive innovation in that space? Like, where do you see these tools actually helping people with things like critical thinking, helping to build a life they want to live, goal setting, like those sorts of things?
Yeah, it's interesting. So the thing that I would say about any technology, so whether it's AI is that the technology doesn't, if you're feeling not great about a technology, positive or negative, depending on the sentiment, the technology is not the thing that's doing that to you. It's the change that it's causing. So talking about the change manager, back in the corporate, the technology is causing the environment to change around you. And there's two lenses that you can apply to that. One lens is I don't want to deal with the change, and therefore I'm going to take a negative sentiment to that change because I'm adverse. I think the change is not benefiting me, so I'm being impacted, by the change. The other lens could be, okay, I think that change brings an opportunity towards that. It's not as simple as saying, just change your mindset and, it's just a mindset piece. It's really then about thinking, okay, if I am going to get impacted by that change, so let's not use AI, but let's use newspapers and digital.
Yeah.
So, digital brought a lot of disruption to a lot of jobs and a lot of people in any of those industries. They will share now that what those organizations and their work used to look like 15 years ago is a slither of what it is now. There were some people that decided to be resistant to that change and say, no, I don't want to do that. I want to stick with what I'm doing with my work. And there were others that embraced it.
Yeah.
So for me, the thing that I can guarantee, not by my view, is that you're not going to stop change from taking place. And so the first thing is I like to take the approach in life that I would rather create my own change than react to change around me.
Yeah.
So I'd like to take more ownership in the fact that I'm choosing to drive my own change than to react to change. So my attitude towards AI is it's actually impacting us too. So I expect AI to impact consulting. I expect AI to impact most services. But I would rather be on the side of creating my own change, which comes with difficulty, because I need to figure out what does that mean for me and what does that mean for the business and what does that look like moving forward, and how do I harness that technology as a skill to stack onto my set of skills, and versus either hoping that it doesn't change or being really resistant to the change. And so, but again, I have an engineering background, so maybe I'm a bit more open to it. But if you're not feeling great about AI or you're a bit concerned about what does that mean for my piece of advice would be learn to play with it. So like spend as much time as you can exploring what it is and try and find something that you might find engaging to try and see the positives of maybe how you would use that. A Seth Godin quote says, resistance is futile, reassurance is futile. But I think, because you can't, we're not going to be able to slow that down to a degree. So we have to somehow eventually embrace what the positives and the negatives are with that. So that's like my philosophical takeaway on the change piece.
No, absolutely. I think it's crazy the amount of confidence you get just from playing around with something like that too, and going, it's not quite like what I thought it would be, or like, you sort of just like lean into it a little bit more. That's great.
But then you should have an informed view. So your point of view on it. So we talk about critical thinking. So, and I'm reading there's a lot of research. There's a lot of conflicting research on where is AI helpful, where is it not? How does it help? Does it help in learning? Does it not? What I'm learning is that I think for me, this is my personal view, and the way that I use, whether it's ChatGPT or Claude or any of these LLMs, is I like to take more of a hypothesis-driven approach, so that I'm developing my critical thinking muscle. What do I mean by that? What I like to do is come up with my answer first, and come up with a point of view first. So I will never go into an AI chatbot and say, "Give me the answer on X." It's very rare. I'm very late, unless I'm extremely lazy. What I would say is, here is my understanding of X. Here is how I think I should approach it. Here is the outcome that I think it should do. Tell me, help me improve my understanding of how to get there. So I'm using AI as a sparring partner, as a teammate, someone that's going to challenge me to improve my rate of learning.
Yeah.
And I think that's going to improve your critical thinking skills, because it's going to show you where there are blind spots and where there are not, and what you've missed, versus being, I say lazy, it's probably the wrong word, but assuming that the AI is going to give you the answer, because I don't trust what the AI gives me, just like I don't trust what Google gives me.
Yeah.
I have a critical eye.
I
have a critical eye on, well, how trustworthy is this? How much evidence is behind this? And I think that's how I tend to think of it. So I think critical thinking is key. I don't think it's going away tomorrow.
Yeah.
But I also think I think in the World Economic Forum, a bunch of their reports, they were saying, it's up at the top. Critical thinking and some of the analytical thinking skills and all that are going to be really important. And I go, yeah, because you still need to think about it, and you need to come to terms with what that looks like. So my encouragement is, try and develop your critical thinking skills where you can. And the easiest way to do that is have a point of view that you can defend. So if you say, I think X, I'll go, great. Tell me why you think X. Like, put forward your argument. It's good debate skills. It's 101 debate skills.
Yeah.
Because that's going to force you to try and articulate your point of view. And I think if you can do that well, you're not only you're going to be more valuable in your skills in the work that you do, but you're going to be able to leverage AI better, to help you with that. That's kind of my critical thinking lens on the AI piece.
So using it more as like someone additional to help you with your critical thinking skills than like actually outsourcing all your critical thinking to the AI, expecting it'll do that for you.
Yeah, and my view is it can't. Well, it can, but I have this joke, and I think, okay, so if we put all of our stuff into AI and say, do it for us, and then it comes up with all these things on the other side, and then so it says, hey, you need to do A, B, C, D, F, G. Okay, so where I tease, the words that I use is, we're an empty vessel. We're just the flesh that's sitting here. That's a machine that is actually doing the you could say the easy stuff, which is the heavy lifting, and we're outsourcing what we think. We're outsourcing, I think, the most important bit, which is, well, what's your point of view?
Yeah.
As a human, and why, and what can you pull together? And there's definitely flaws with our point of views, because we've got all this bias, all these cognitive biases. But that's also, I think, the beauty of what it is to be human, which is, well, what is your point of view and why? And I just think it's far more powerful to do that. I wouldn't even be outsourcing an email to ChatGPT to say, write this email from scratch.
Yeah.
What I would be doing is saying, here is my email. Here is what I'm trying to get across. This is what really matters to me. Help me refine this.
Yeah, so it's more about like the inputs and being like really critical about the inputs and then getting the outputs you want from that. Yeah,
because I think there's a huge risk in my view is, if you don't use those skills, you lose them. Yeah. And so if you spend a year or two just putting stuff in without thinking, you're going to lose those skills. But also, the person who puts stuff in with thinking is going to outperform you by 5 to 10 times if they do it well.
For sure.
So my view is, spend much more time doing the inputs. And that's not being a prompt engineer. That's actually thinking about, what is it that I'm trying to do here? Yeah. That's the critical thinking skill set, not just the prompt engineering skill set. So, yeah. But I mean, my question to you would be, what are you hearing from the community about the AI piece? Like, what are some of the things that have come up for you?
Yeah, I mean, I guess there's like lots of everyone speaking before, but I feel like everyone's got an opinion. Like it's one of those things. Everyone has an opinion on AI at the moment, whether it's doing wonders for the world and productivity and saving lives, or whether it's doing all these negative things as well. I think there's use cases for it. And at the end of the day, it's we talk about tools and like tools and lenses.
Yeah.
And if these tools aren't being used in the correct way, then you know, of course they're not going to be working well, and they're not going to be benefiting. But if we are using these tools in a way that's going to support us, if we are inputting these tools something that's valuable, hopefully we can get something valuable out and take something from that.
Yeah.
And I think like the way these tools are evolving, and I mean, we do a lot of work creating these tools as well. So we actually are the ones creating them too. And the way we intend to create them is as critical thinking tools. We don't just create them to produce an output. We create them to play back things and to actually ask questions back. And I think that's sort of where I see it going as well. I was listening to a podcast the other day about prompt engineering and essentially around how prompt engineering may become less important because the way that these tools are evolving should be to actually be prompting us back. Like they should be working with us to help us think critically as well, and asking those key questions to be able to get outputs that are the best quality and do the right job.
Yeah, yeah, it's interesting. I think I've thought about, I go through my podcast and my thinking about the existential positive and negatives of AI.
Yeah.
And for the sake of your anxiety or my anxiety, I would suggest not doing that because I think
that's a dangerous rabbit hole.
I think it's pointless. Like I think, and if we use social media as an example, so you know, social media, there are both really really big positives in social media, and there are also a lot of negatives in what social media bring.
Yeah,
and that's not something we fully understand. So if you think everyone's got a point of view on social media, you can, for every influencer that's promoting it, you have another one that's saying it's not great or vice versa. And my view is we still don't understand it fully. Like what I mean by that is we still don't understand the impact that these large scale technologies have on society. Let's put it in those words. And so I would rather try, Nick is a little human, is to try and find ways to use it in a way that I think is ethical, is good, is adding value, is you know, contributing to productivity, all those things. And there are plenty of people that are going to be debating at a much higher level than me about that. But I don't think having the view of saying it's bad is or it's good is going to be helpful because it depends.
Yeah.
You know, so
yeah, absolutely.
So that's kind of for every social media positive thing, you know, amazing businesses, anyone can have commerce around the world. You know, we hear about the impacts on kids, we hear about mental health, we hear about all that. So it depends.
Yeah.
You know, my thing is try and take what we learned. What I'm taking from AI is what I learned in social media, and I wasn't a big social media. I didn't get hooked on social media. I had a lot of friends that got hooked. So what I'm learning is make sure that you are in control. You put parameters around how you choose to use the tools, and not fall into you know, don't fall into the trap of the tool actually using you. So be really clear about your parameters. You know, we have people saying, "I've got my phone's locked now, and I can only access Instagram 5 minutes a day because, you know, I can't control myself, so the phone doesn't control me." You know, joke. But so I just think we've learned that through social media as a technology. Let's try and I'm trying to take those learnings and say, how do I apply that to a new technology like AI? As an example. Yeah, it's
a delicate balance between like removing, like there's been so much time in tech removing friction, and now humans are sort of putting that friction back in, and it's sort of like that tension and that grapple between like that friction and like where is that zone that lies where people are actually comfortable in what they're doing with it, and it's productive and it's like good and
and I just think the middle will get squeezed.
Yeah.
What I mean by that is if you look at social media, so social media has started to squeeze traditional industries and essentially anything that's been in the middle. Social media has created a technology that says, "Hey, if you've got something to sell and you want to market, we can facilitate that." All these middle aspects of trade, we're removing all that. I think the same thing's going to happen with AI. So I think embrace analog or go all in the other side. Anywhere in the middle is risky. so you know, if you're someone that really loves analog and you think that's the case, my suggestion would be embrace that now. Like go, don't ignore the technology, but go find things at the ultra human side of the spectrum and go all in on that.
Yeah,
I actually think it's going to be valuable. Yeah.
No, that's been fantastic. Yeah. Thank you, Nick, for the conversation. Really interesting. I feel like we got super philosophical towards the end. Where can people find you if they wanna reach out, connect with you?
Yeah, hit me up on LinkedIn. So that's my space. Send me a connection request, Nick Rakis, and just DM me, send me a note, say hello.
Fantastic.
And thank you for having me, Alex.
No, thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Yep.
Hope you enjoyed.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Cheers.